So all we've got here is a seemingly unremarkable 6x6 concrete box culvert. I noticed this last year when I was canoeing the river, Lamoille River, that this feeds into, and noticed the line striping on these slabs that are being used as kind of part of the downstream wing wall protection. This indicates that this was, prior to being moved here, a bridge deck. What I found particularly interesting is it's exposed concrete, which generally indicates that it's a newer bridge deck, because after a while bridge decks will deteriorate. Even so, some bridge decks might be concrete and then they're intended to have asphalt put over them, but some bridge decks are intended to be concrete and stay concrete, but after a while they can deteriorate to a point where you might membrane and asphalt over them, even though initially it was intended to be concrete. But over here you'll see what to me is a real indication. I don't know exactly when this started, but that green covering on the outside of the rebar tells me that this is epoxy coated rebar. The state agency of transportation, VTrans, that maintains this culvert, it's on a state highway or under a state highway, doesn't consider epoxy coated rebar any different than just straight uncoated black iron rebar. But at one point they might have, before they realized it wasn't really doing much. But epoxy coated rebar, though it's been around for some amount of time, has not been around forever. Which just kind of is interesting that such a relatively new bridge deck would have needed to come out and then get used just kind of as concrete slabs here. This culvert, which carries Jones Brook under Route 15 in Wolcott, Vermont, was built in 1941. What I find kind of interesting about being built in 1941 is that the concrete, like the material that's made up of this concrete, doesn't look like modern large aggregate. It looks much closer to some of the other stuff I've seen in bridge abutments older than this, but clearly still used now. What I'm seeing is a lack of angular edges, which could just be due to the water running through here as it erodes the cement and fine aggregate sand. But it also could be that this was just kind of riverbank run gravel that was sorted out, screened out. One indication that was the screening is that it's a whole mix of different types of gravel or stones in here. It's not just one type, which is what you'd see if they're kind of with modern concrete, that they're crushing, they're blasting rock out of a quarry and then crushing it. You can also see on this upstream side there are wing walls built in, but then they determined that on the downstream side they needed to add wing walls. There's been a little bit of maintenance here with some more modern stone armoring put on this slope at some point, with time to have stuff grow over it. But there's also some debris. This debris probably washed down here during the most recent storm, which was at the gauge downstream in Johnson, Vermont, was the highest flows this river has ever seen in that gauge's history. So a pretty substantial storm. Some other storm damage I noticed under here as I got it in my hair is that there's a whole bunch of debris on the top of this culvert, which is an indication that in that storm the waters were above this culvert. This culvert is 6 feet high, at another, it looks like 18 inches there, and then maybe even another foot you're seeing debris up there. So there was a lot of water just under a month ago when we had that really quite large storm.
While certainly there was a lot of water coming down Jones Brook, the capacity of the culvert must consider the backwater that the Lamoille River, just downstream, has on it. Even on the day of filming, the river level was only about 2 feet below the outlet of the culvert. I would guess that the highest water on the upstream end of the culvert occurred not at the highest flows of Jones Brook, soon after the heaviest rain, but rather when the Lamoille was the highest, several hours later as water gathered from its longer distance collection area. Just upstream on the Lamoille is one of the bridges on the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail that I looked at in a video last summer. Though washed out in the 27 flood, it withstood this one, the highest since then on this river. Other locations on the rail trail were not so favored.
This here is a gravel bar that must have come in during that storm by a road, or may not come in, but it was definitely, there's some movement. You see plants buried over here. What I think is interesting is if we go back down through the tunnel, or culvert, kind of acts as a tunnel. You see the gravel has come out of this area. When I first saw this about a year and a quarter ago in April 2022, August 2021 now, this area was a much deeper pool. Like, I had to get into this culvert, I had to hop across these rocks. Whereas now, I can just walk through here, which has made this filming a lot easier. The last inspection published online that the state did of this structure was November of 2021. Structures like this are typically inspected every 5 years unless there's a need to inspect them more frequently. This is considered a short structure, which means that it's between 6 feet, it's 6 feet wide of the span. It actually might be a little bit longer than 6 feet because the road doesn't cross it entirely perpendicular to how this culvert comes through, and they measure the length that the road crosses it, not the narrowest width of this culvert. Whereas a long structure is greater than 20 feet. A short structure is 6 feet to 20 feet. This structure is 82 years old, so it's fairly good shape given that time frame. I'd say there isn't anything majorly wrong I see, nor did the state see. Climbing back up to the top of here, this most recent storm did start eating away at this wing wall. It's not in any immediate danger of being eroded around, but it's starting to look like it's moving there. There's definitely some erosion there in this most recent storm, which, given the ferocity and water levels, is not surprising. But I should get out of here before the rain that's currently falling, which we're supposed to get potentially 2 to 4 inches tonight and tomorrow, picks up and could get quite intense here, depending exactly how much falls upstream. Though in the month we've dried out some, we've had continuous rainstorms. The ground is still fairly saturated and could cause another large storm to get water levels to rise a lot.